episode of Focus on Fundamentals. I hope everyone had a fabulous weekend and you're ready for a good week of sewing, and hopefully the rain will hold off a little bit. It rained, I don't know about down here, but it rained at my house last night, buckets. So we'll see. Okay, so today we're going to talk about pinning. There's a lot of different pins that are on the market, and there's lots of different techniques that people use to pin. And I'm going to show you some of my favorites, some of the pins that I don't care so much for, and we'll kind of see what happens. So, first thing is, let's go over some pins. So, go down here to the table. First pin is a flower head pin. Can we see that? Okay.
It's kind of light. I don't know if I can get any closer and stay in focus. That's pretty good.
Is that pretty good? Mm-hmm. Okay. So this is a flower head pin. They're pretty large. They're nice and sharp. They're a good pin. I like to use these for paper piecing. Anytime you paper piece, you have pieces that go together that sit real close to your needle. Sometimes you need that to be really super flat and you don't want a ball head in the way. So I like to use those flower head pins for that. The next pin is a generic pin. You can get them anywhere. They usually come in sewing kits, things like that. These pins I don't sell, I don't use, I do not like. They are way too thick. They are not very sharp, and when you put them in fabric, they buckle your fabric. You get a real big bump on them. I just don't use them. I'm sure they have their place, maybe in garment sewing, things like that, but as far as quilting, I don't use them, okay?
To pin on the display wall.
Oh, there you go. Put them on the display wall. That's a perfect use for them. But in quilting, yeah, I don't use those. Then we have these are super duper pins. These are magic pins from Taylor, and they're thin. They're extremely sharp. But what I like best is the rubber tip. It's got grooves in it. It's easy to pick up. It's easy to handle. And if you drop it on the floor, you can find it. So that's my favorite. And I'll show you what I use these for here in just a few minutes. Now, I'm going to put these back up here, and I'm going to show you my all-time favorite. This guy is a Clover patchwork pin.
Maybe put it in your hand. I think you see it better.
Get my ring out of the way.
No. Probably on the paper.
On the paper? Okay.
It's so thin.
It is super, super thin. And these are very, very sharp. They're long. They are flexible, and they are the perfect pin, in my opinion, for piecing, for putting your seams together, and I'll show you that here in a minute. But you can see the difference in all the different shafts on these pins. Some are very thick, some are thin, and some are very thin, okay? These two are what we're going to use most often. If you come in here, that's what I use, that's what I sell, that's what I like. Okay, so general pinning. If you are just going to sew two pieces of fabric together, like two rectangles, we're going to pretend this is not here, and you want to pin them together, excuse me, a lot of people will pin perpendicular to the fabric. Okay, that's fine if that works for you. For me, though, when I start to sew, I've got to stop, pull out a pin. Sew, stop, pull out a pin. And to me, that's a waste of time. I don't know, that's just me. But what I like to do is I like to pin parallel, hope I'm using my words right, parallel to the edge that I'm going to stitch on. Just far enough away that my presser foot is not going to interfere with that pin, because I want to do some speed sewing. Okay, so if I have to have those pinned together, I feel more comfortable with that, okay. But I can start sewing and sew all the way down and never touch those pins. The purpose of doing this kind of pinning is just to stabilize those fabrics. You don't need to match anything. You just want to hold your fabrics together. Okay, so that's how I pin when I do just regular pinning. Now, my super secret pinning tip is when it comes to seams that need to match. Okay, so our objective is to get a nice perfect intersection. Let me see that, okay? Okay. That's our objective. And this is how I get there. I learned this tip from Susan Cleveland. She's a national teacher, well recognized in the quilting industry. And she showed me this technique, and it's been a game changer. I know I've showed this to a lot of you, so if you've seen this before, you'll recognize it. If you haven't seen it before, hopefully you'll find it very, very useful. So when you go to intersect seams, your seam allowances need to be in opposite directions so that your fabric nests. Okay, we've all heard about you have to nest your seams. And to do that, you can lay one fabric down, lay the other one across, and just kind of scoot it over, and it will stop itself automatically. Okay, and you know that seam is nested. You can test that by holding your pieces of fabric together, about a 1/4 inch or so down. And if you open it up, you see that? See how those are sitting right next to each other? Those are nice and nested, okay? So I want to keep that nested. I'm gonna hold it pretty tight right there. I'm gonna take my nice thin pin, and I'm gonna end up going through 2 layers of fabric instead of 4 layers of fabric by doing this. I'm gonna take this pin and I'm gonna slide it till my pin touches the seam. And then I'm gonna go straight to the back, straight to the front. And I don't care where it ends up. I don't care that it's not touching that seam because the shaft of the pin is, okay? And when you sew, you're going to sew. Most people will stop and pull out pins when the presser foot when the tip of the front of the presser foot comes in contact with that pin. That's too early because your needle is clear back here. So what I do is I sew until the needle hits almost to that pin. Then I'm going to stop and I'm going to slide the pin out. Okay? And if you notice, very little hump happened there. And then I'll continue to sew on. And when you get that accomplished, once you sew that seam with your good 1/4 inch and you open that up, those match perfectly. Okay? And I said I went through 2 layers of fabric. So let me show you. Because the more layers of fabric you go through, the harder it is for that seam to actually come out correctly. So if you look here, I've got this purple and this white. And if I go under this seam allowance, the only thing that's going to hit is this white. I'm not going to hit anything but 2 layers of fabric. Okay? And it's always better to put to pin 2 layers of fabric than it is to pin 4. Some people will try to go through this seam allowance, but there you have 1, 2, 3, 4 layers of fabric you're trying to go through. Okay? And you can do that, but look at that bump that occurs. Can you see that bump in there? That's a bigger bump than if I had just gone through 2 layers. Okay? Because when you put, and this is something you may have to come in and let me show you so you can experience it for yourself. But if you put your finger right here and you pull this pin out, you can't hardly tell that there was even a pin there. That's the key. The thinner the pin, the less layers you have to go through, the better your end result will be. Okay? I hope that made sense. Mm-hmm. Now, sometimes you will have an instance where your seams will never nest, and they're just not going to. And in that regard. It's just kind of a hit and miss kind of thing. And this is what I've ended up doing. I will put these together. Whoop. I guess I really got my sharp pin there. Okay, so I'm going to put those seams together the best that I can, lining them up at the edge. And then I'm going to tip it back and make sure that those seams are lined up. Okay. And then again, I'm going to go through, this time I'm going through a lot of layers. I'm going through 6 layers of fabric right now, 2 seam allowances and 2 pieces of fabric. But I'm going to go straight down and straight up, just as little as I can. And again, when I go to sew, I'm going to try to hit right before that pin and pull it out. A lot of people are going to pin on both sides. If you pin on both sides, you're risking the fabric shifting when you pull out a pin. So this is just my personal preference on what I do. Okay, I hope that made sense. And you can come in and I will show you how to do that. So I hope it made sense to you. I hope you take a look at your pins, try them out. And if you need some help or want some more advice or information on pins, then feel free to come in. I'd be happy to walk you through this. And until next time, focus on your fundamentals. Your quilting will thank you for it.